definitely a double thumbs down on this before. So I actually found this off of Facebook Marketplace, and I was looking for this specific style because I wanted to turn it into an apothecary style cabinet / console. I found a picture on Pinterest forever ago that I fell in love with. Here it is, actually. And I wanted to recreate this somehow. So here we go. The bones of the dresser were solid, and it was actually a pretty heavy dresser. Most of it was pine. Come to find out, there was some other wood. It might have been plywood, but I don't think it was. I don't know what it was. But I wasn't fond of the bottom molding as well as the top molding that ran under the top of the dresser. So I took those off, and this gave me a little bit of trouble because there was some screws holding it in, come to find out. I ended up replacing the bottom molding with base molding that I actually kind of made. So you'll see that coming up. Moving on to the top. Since there was so much surface area to it, I decided to strip it instead of sanding it. So I painted on the Citrus Strip paint stripper. Again, you can get it at any of your big box stores. It smells nice and orangey, but don't be confused, it's still chemicals. So let that sit for a couple of hours. Since it only was a sealer coat and then a coat of stain, it actually went to work pretty quickly. After that, I scraped it off with a scraper and then went over it with a damp cloth and then finally a dry cloth, just to make sure that the surface was fully dry for when I have to go and actually sand it. Moving on to the drawers. I actually kept these knobs. They were in pretty good condition and I liked them. Me and my hoarding tendencies, I'm sure I'll use them somewhere else. But these drawers were actually called overlay drawers. So they overlap the face frame of the dresser on all four sides equally. And what I want to do is actually change them to be inset drawers. So when you push it in, it will be inset and flush with the face frame of the cabinet. I don't know why. I think I just wanted to mimic the style of the older style furniture, which is what a lot of them used to be. So what you need to do is get your overall dimension of your drawer opening, width as well as height, and then figure out how much play you have on the dresser as far as overlay goes. So I actually had about 3/16 to 1/4 inch on each side as well as the top and bottom that I needed to cut off on the table saw. So that's what I did. And I should have taken the better safe than sorry approach, because I learned after the first couple drawers that they weren't all the same and they weren't all square. So some of them aren't perfect, but it was just something I had to live with. But after all of the tops and bottoms were cut down, I moved on to the drawer fronts. And I actually just took those through the jointer. The jointer took off a lot of that detail molding that was on there. And then after that, I just sanded it down, sanded it nice and smooth. And since I wanted them to be inset drawers, I had to cut off a little bit of the drawer slide so it fit all the way into the face frame. And there we have it, an inset drawer. I'm actually pretty excited with how they turned out. And what I actually wanted to do was make all new drawers for the dresser, 24 individual drawers, but I opted for functionality, really, of the piece, as well as profitability, I'll be honest. So what I did instead was I used the trim router with a straight cut bit, and I mimicked the look of drawers on the drawer front. And I used the smaller drawers as a template, and the smaller drawers had about an inch gap between each of the faces, I would say. So I used my speed square, I measured back 1.5 inches from the first cut that I wanted to make, which was what the base plate to the router bit was, and then moved the speed square in 1/2 inch, and then made another cut, because my straight cut bit was a 1/2 inch bit. Once I made all the individual cuts with the trim router, I moved on to sanding all the drawer fronts. And I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm sanding until I'm blue in the face. But I put on some good music and it's brain numbing work, really. So you just get it done. As I was sanding some of the drawer fronts, I noticed that some of the wood knots started to crack. So I actually wanted to go and fill those in because I didn't want it to be a further issue in the future. and I used Starbond CA glue. This stuff is amazing. You guys literally need to go buy it right now. So I use the black color just to kind of blend in with the wood knot a little bit, and they come in 3 different viscosities. There's a thin, a medium, and then a thick. So you literally just squeeze it into the crack. In this case, that's what I'm doing, squeezing it into the crack, and then you spray on the accelerator, and the accelerator makes it cure literally within like 2 to 3 seconds. It's dry to the touch. So in this case, I needed to do a couple different applications because it gets absorbed into that crack. So you'll see I go over it again. But guys, this is my go-to glue if you need something to set up instantly. So if you're doing like a picture frame or trim molding, literally anything, what you would do in that case is you put the glue on one surface, and then you put the accelerator on the other surface, and you attach them together. You bond them together. Stuff is great. Oh, what a surprise. What am I doing? Sanding again. But luckily this process went pretty quick. Like I said earlier, there was just the sealer coat and the 1 coat of stain on it. So 100 grit sandpaper took it right off. And then just to smooth out the surface, I went over it with 120 and then 150 after that. And I don't really know why I started using the orbital on the top. It was taking me forever. So I went with the big guns and got out the belt sander. And I can't wait until I upgrade to the Rotex Festool because it has a gear mode on it. So it's like a belt sander and an orbital all in one. But for now, my belt sander will do. It was actually my grandfather's. I think the thing's probably about 40 years old. And here I'm actually just attaching some new top trim molding that's gonna go under the top of the dresser using the Type Bond green label, as I call it. I think it's interior and exterior waterproof glue. When it comes to using wood glue, you wanna make sure you would put it on bare wood to bare wood surfaces. That's gonna get your best adhesion. So for instance, like if I was attaching this trim molding to a painted surface, the glue isn't able to absorb through the paint. Because think of it, a paint is a sealer. So glue is really not gonna get a really good adhesion. So just keep that in mind. If you have a painted surface, your wood glue isn't really gonna attach that well. So just moved on and used some brad nails and attached the top molding. Moving on to the base molding. This is actually some molding I got from a big box store again. And I attached it all and then I ended up ripping it off. If you can see, I left a small little gap on the bottom. I was gonna put in a filler piece because I needed it to be a certain height, but it looked bad. So I ended up ripping it off and cutting the trim molding right here and then attaching a filler piece of, it was about 1.5 inches high by 3/4 of an inch thick. And that actually created a little bit of dimension, which actually looked pretty good on the base molding. Everyone say hi to Jade, she's making a cameo appearance. Here, I'm actually just attaching all the hardware. Again, I made another jig. I made one in a previous video as well. It actually makes attaching hardware so much easier. I do have a Craig jig for hardware attachments, but in this case, it just didn't work. So, scrap piece of wood got the job done. Cut it to the dimension of your drawer front, center your holes for the hardware, drill through, and then use the center punch. After that, this hardware was actually attached to the face frame with Phillip head screws, instead of being attached from behind with machine screws. So I didn't drill all the way through, just a little pre-drill, just so none of the wood cracked or anything went wrong. And rinse and repeat 24 more times. The one thing I didn't include in this video was the whitewash technique, the paint technique that I used on the dresser to get this finish. So I'll leave a link in the description below for that video. But you guys aren't gonna believe this before and after. Are you ready for it? Are you excited for it? Bye-bye dated pine dresser. Hello, gorgeous scrub pine vintage apothecary. Talk about a before and after. I love saving furniture because, let's be real, our landfills really can't handle any more garbage in them. I hope you guys enjoyed this flip. Definitely subscribe if you like the videos you've seen thus far, because there are many more to come. And I included a picture of it staged fully so you guys can see what it looked like. Thanks!